the culture, traditions, and resilience of the Tlingit people. Ganeshish.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Madam Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Smith.
Here.
Ms. Hughes Scandies is not with us tonight. Mr. Bryson. Ms. Wall.
Present.
Walal Hida.
Here.
Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Ms. Adkisson, are you with us?
Here.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Hale is absent. Mayor Weldon.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Never mind. I thought you forgot Mr. Smith. Thank you. Ms. Wall, can you tell us about our minutes?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the Assembly approve the December 11th, 2023 regular Assembly meeting minutes, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Any objections? Seeing none, those minutes are approved. Ms. Manager, Madam Manager, do you have a request for agenda changes tonight?
We do have an addition to staff reports. We have a memo certifying the initiative and then an FAQ memo.
So is that going to come before or after the new parking system upgrade? I have the supplemental, but I don't actually have it on the agenda.
It will be before.
Okay. Thank you. Any other changes? Thank you, Madam Manager. Public participation on non-agenda items. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody on Zoom that has signed up beforehand?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No, we did not get any advance signups for the Zoom participants tonight.
Perfect. So it looks like we have 3 so far, so we'll give 3 minutes apiece. And our first one is Doreen Lorenz. Please come up and state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes. I think you're seasoned at this, but just push the button to make it green.
Thank you. My name is Doreen Lorenz, and I live at 2328 Marcia Avenue. As we're celebrating the 4th of July this week, I want to challenge you to do something especially meaningful. We'll be waving our flags during the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence in 2 very short years, 2026. Nationally, America's commemoration is not just focusing on the past or looking to the future. Instead, it's fostering a sense of togetherness, honoring the contributions of Americans from all walks of life and our unique experiences that makes our nation so extraordinary. We really need to start thinking about how Alaskans want to tell our story, what our contributions are to the success of this nation, and more importantly, how we can celebrate in a way that is meaningful, memorable, inclusive, and fun. There are a few suggestions making the rounds, from semi-quincentennial minutes like the bicentennial minutes we watched in 1976, to getting the historic ball fields listed on the National Historic Register and rekindling the City League games in historic uniforms. Since Major League Baseball is an America 250 sponsor, there actually is the possibility that we could get a couple Major League teams up to play an exhibition game for the season opener. Juneau has a real opportunity here to make a leadership flex. We've always led the nation by our example. The first bill coming out of our territorial legislature gave women the right to vote a dozen years before it passed nationally. And based on the strength of our Tlingit families, we passed civil rights legislation when Dr. Martin Luther King was still in diapers. Late last week, I was invited to go to Washington, D.C. Next week, on behalf of the Historical Commission for Alaska, to solely represent Alaska in an America 250 meeting where we'll be tying state projects together with private nationwide funders. Alaska is just starting to prepare for America 250 events. Nothing, absolutely nothing, has formally been organized in this state. The rest of the nation has a 2-year jump start on us. Please share your creative ideas on ways that Alaska can participate so I can take these concepts with me and we can see if we can get some wheels underneath them. You can Google my name, Doreen Lorenz, to get my contact information. Please do not be shy about contacting me with some big as Alaska crazy ideas. We are just in the brainstorming phase, so right now there's no such thing as a bad idea. Let's work together to make this celebration as amazing as America. And can I humbly suggest that it may make sense for the CBJ to enact a Juneau 250 Commission to work out the details of our celebration. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lorenz. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony tonight. Next, we have Connor Cheney. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes, and it looks like she's kept it green for you.
Hello, hey, my name's Connor Cheney, and I live in downtown Juneau. Good evening, esteemed members of the Juneau Assembly. I stand, sit, before you on behalf of Perseverance Theater, not as an official representative, but as a longtime consumer and participant in Juneau's theater arts community. Firstly, I believe the order of the day is thanks. A warm thank you to the Juneau Assembly, to Mayor Weldon and Katie Kessner, City Manager, and Jack Executive Director Phil Hibshin for listening to their community and increasing the CBJ Arts free grant budget from $116,000 to $266,000. In conversation with Perseverance Managing Director Frank Delaney and Development Director Benjamin Brown, I've learned that for every dollar of local government funding received, the theater brings in 5 to 10 times that amount from national foundations and federal grants. And 90% of that money stays right here in Juneau. Private money follows public money, and I think you'll be very happy with the return on your investment. In addition to your support, Perseverance's own income streams have been in many ways highly successful. Ticket sales cover 50% of production costs compared to the national average of 35 to 40%. Despite this, Frank and Ben also described the pandemic's lasting financial scars. Audience numbers remain 25 to 30% below pre-pandemic levels. Subscriptions have almost halved. Many of the theater's most loyal patrons belong to an older demographic who are just not ready to return to live shows. Lumber costs remain at 2 to 3 times pre-pandemic levels, while the aging Perseverance campus desperately needs renovations. Now, you may have seen headlines of the theater's seemingly impressive philanthropic wins, such as the Mellon Foundation's 2-year $500,000 grant. While essential, these restricted funds cannot provide assistance where Perseverance needs it most, day-to-day operating costs. As one of the state's largest professional arts organizations, the greatest expense is people, payrolling 13 full and part-time staff. The Summer Star program provides students critical social skill building and mental health support, areas still recovering from the pandemic. In the face of Alaska's burgeoning mental health crisis, these are not luxuries, but essentials. Pay as you can, nights combined with over 153 tickets given away for every show ensures Perseverance remains accessible to all members of our community. Last Wednesday, Perseverance Theater, along with 19 other organizations, presented their case to the Jack Major Grant panel. Although to my knowledge, a final decision is still pending, I know these re-grant funds will be critical to the future health of Juneau's performing arts. However, given the extraordinary nature of our times, Perseverance still needs operating support, and I ask the Assembly to take that into consideration in future construction of unrestricted grants. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Cheney? Thank you for your testimony tonight. Next, we have Carla Hart. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Carla Hart, Back Loop. I thought I talked fast, but I have nothing on that. I'm here tonight to speak, one, on the citizens initiative we just did, and the city clerk said that since it's on the agenda, I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about it, basically.
We're allowing you to talk on the non-agenda section.
Thank you. Oh, to wait until.
No, you're good.
Okay.
Right now.
Thank you very much. Okay. So thank you to the community and to the volunteers and to the city clerk's office for their relentless work on it. We managed to secure almost 3,000 signatures, of which the required 2,359 were certified. And so Juneau will have the chance to vote on whether or not we want sheep-free Saturdays. And I urge the Assembly to help to lead a really respectful, objective discussion in the community. People really care about this, and this is a chance for us to make a difference and to show that we can do something. I spent some of the weekend playing with numbers, and I was really surprised in analyzing the 2024 and 2025 cruise ship schedules as presented on the Cruise Line Agencies of Alaska website. And to enter all of the data in and come out that for the lower berth capacity between 2024 and 2025, there's actually a reduction of 563 passengers. So to remember that this schedule was developed a couple years ago. It was developed before the 16,000 passenger limit was put in. It was developed before the citizen initiative was out there. What's really interesting is if you sort the passenger numbers by the corporate ownership, Carnival Corporation, Royal Caribbean Holding Company, and Norwegian Caribbean Holding Company, you find out that Carnival and Royal Caribbean brands have reductions of 31,000 and 20,000 respectively. So they are somehow holding back on capacity with nothing that any of us have been doing. Well, NCL has increased their capacity by 45,000 between 2024 and 2025, effectively offsetting the reductions that the other two brands are. I think it's really important that you get a really good understanding of what's happening with the industry, because they're making decisions that have nothing to do with what we're doing here. They're making decisions to optimize their profits. And I think that Carnival Corporation and Royal Caribbean are seeing that they can increase their ticket prices if they tie down on demand, on capacity, whereas NCL must be going with the bulk capacity. I don't know exactly what's happening there. But to just understand that this is a really complex industry that we're working with, and you need to really understand what's going on, run the numbers, and have a good feeling for what they are. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Hart? Thank you for your testimony tonight. Kevin, did anybody else sign, or excuse me, Mr. Allen, did anybody else sign up when I wasn't looking? All right, well, that concludes our public participation on non-agenda items. So that brings us to our consent agenda items. Is there any public request for consent agenda changes other than ordinances for introduction? Seeing none. Is there any assembly requests for consent agenda changes? Seeing none, assembly action, Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I ask that the Assembly adopt the consent agenda, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, the consent agenda is adopted. That brings us to public hearing. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The first ordinance up for public hearing is ordinance 2024-25, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds in the principal amount of not to exceed $12,750,000 to finance public safety communications infrastructure within the city and borough, and submitting a proposition to the voters at the election to be held therein on October 1st, 2024.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
Thank you. I think I could probably use a little training from Perseverance Theater for reading quickly, but here goes. This ordinance would send one general obligation bond proposition of up to $12.75 million for the improvement of public safety communication infrastructure, including but not limited to replacing the outdated communication system with a system that will be Alaska Land Mobile Radio compliant. The current system is beyond its useful life and is experiencing dead zones and limited interoperability with other agencies. The total project cost is currently estimated between $24 and $25 million, of which the Assembly has already appropriated $8.7 million of general funds and sales tax. An additional $3.5 million is secured for this project via congressionally directed spending and 1% sales tax. The Assembly requested staff introduce an ordinance to submit a proposition to the voters on the October 1st, 2024 election ballot during the June 3rd, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting. The Assembly Finance Committee reviewed this request at its May 1, 2024 meeting. The Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed this ordinance at its June 18th, 2024 meeting. I recommend you take public testimony and adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Is there any public that would like to testify on this ordinance? Mr. Bergstrom. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes. And don't forget to hit the red button. There you go. Perfect.
Frank Bergstrom, Fred Meyer. Congratulations to the manager. It was very rapid. This is a public hearing, yet we have no proposal. I do not begrudge the police service adequate communications in any way whatsoever, but for a public hearing from a process standpoint, what is the proposal? Is it a cell phone? Is it a radio? Is it satellite-based? Is it smoke signals? I have requested that same information from the police department. They did not have any publicly available information there over these last 2 weeks in the process of redacting what they do have so that they can share that information. So my question to you is this actually a hearing? And if so, where is the proposal? I have no idea. Again, I don't begrudge the police service, fantastic communication system, and I wish them the very best. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Bergstrom? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Any other member of the public wish to speak to this ordinance? Seeing none, we'll bring it to the Assembly. Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the Assembly adopt ordinance 2024-25, authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds in the principal amount of not to exceed $12,750,000 to finance public safety communication infrastructure within the city and borough, and submit a proposition to the voters at the election to be held therein on October 1st, 2024, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Ms. Wall?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just objecting for a question. I think Mr. Bergstrom's question is a good one. We'll might have to answer this question along the way. And I'm not sure if there's anyone from CCFR or JPD to answer this question, or if Madam Manager, you can answer it. But would someone explain kind of what are the components of the public safety communication infrastructure that this would be funding?
Madam Manager, is that you or is that Mr. Deputy Manager?
Well, let's see, while he was testifying, I went and looked in my email string with some of this project proposal information on it, because we have been talking about the radio communication systems project. I think we called it JPD Towers, JPD Radio for a while, and then we realized that this actually impacts CCFR, Capital Transit, Public Works, and all the users of the radio system. So I can tell you that this is replacing our analog VHF system, again with the ALMR compliant Alaska Land Mobile Radio system. There's a lot of components to it that I'm not familiar with, that maybe Deputy Manager Barr is, building towers, installing infrastructure, handheld units in vehicles. All of our city vehicles have those units. Not all of our city vehicles, but all of our public works and first responder vehicles have those. So I don't, have details on design. I do know that we have initiated design for this project, and I imagine Deputy Manager Barr can fill in some more details.
Mr. Barr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Manager Kester captured it very well. I think the only thing that I would add is that, assuming the Assembly passes this ordinance, we would do what we typically do for general obligation bond questions and construct a voter information guide that would contain frequently asked questions, many of which the managers just sort of highlighted there that would go to the voters in advance of the ballot.
Okay, you're a little bit hard to hear, but I heard frequently asked questions in the voter pamphlet before it goes to the ballot. Is that correct? Okay. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. And I think Ms. Kester and Mr. Barr answered my questions very well. I guess I thought my objection is for a question and maybe a follow-up comment after that. So it's my understanding, having seen the process play out in the past, that at this point, we are just going to the voters and asking them, is it okay if we borrow the money for the project? The actual appropriation of the funds will be at a later date, assuming that the voters approve that. That's correct?
Madam Manager.
You are correct, though it should be noted, you have appropriated 8.7 million already towards the project.
Thank you. And if I may, unless there's somebody else.
No, go ahead.
All right. I just want to say that I was fortunate to participate in my second ride-along a few months ago. At that time, I did kind of hear firsthand some of the difficulties with communications. And so at this time, I am inclined to support this project, and I withdraw my objection.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly, and I forgot to ask you, Ms. Wall, are you withdrawing your objection? Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The only thing I wanted to include is that not only have we been discussing this emergency service provider radio system that has been years past its useful life since 2018, but I believe it was in 2020 that there was actually a study conducted that showed that we have in the valley 50% dead zones in many areas. And then the delay from not having already acted on this, the initial dollar figure when we were first discussing this was only like 17 or 18, $19 million. And now we're up to $25 million because of inflation and delay. So I would recommend that we approve this at this time, Madam Mayor. Thank you. I did not have an objection, but I want to comment on that.
Thank you. So seeing no objection, that ordinance passes. Item 5, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2024-26, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds in the principal amount of not to exceed $10 million to finance wastewater utility infrastructure within the city and borough, and submitting a proposition to the voters at the election to be held therein on October 1st, 2024.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
This ordinance would send one general obligation bond proposition up to $10 million for the replacement of the wastewater clarifier building at the Juneau Douglas wastewater treatment plant that services Thane, downtown, and Douglas. The total project cost is currently estimated to be as high as $14 million. Project costs exceeding the bond amount will be funded from wastewater fund balance. The Assembly requested staff introduce an ordinance to submit a proposition to the voters on the October 1, 2024 election ballot during the June 3, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting. The Assembly Finance Committee reviewed this request at its May 1, 2024 meeting, and the Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed this ordinance at its June 18, 2024 meeting. I recommend you hold public testimony and adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to this ordinance? Mr. Burks? Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Nano Brooks. I live in Auk Bay. And with this proposed bond and the previous one for the comms, these are issues that have been, pressing for many years now. And I'm just wondering at this point why bonds are being proposed after the service life of specific systems, and then also with the wastewater right now that we're in, communications with the EPA and everything to get into compliance. just wondering why the bonds are being requested now and they weren't requested earlier on when the issues were first presenting themselves.
All right, I'm going to remind you, this is your time to testify. It's not time to ask questions. We'll do the
Just
best we can to
phrasing
get
it,
those
sorry.
out. Okay. You have anything further? All right, thank you for your testimony. Any other member of the public wishes to testify? All right, we'll bring it back to the assembly. Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the Assembly approve ordinance 2024-26, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds in the principal amount of not to exceed $10 million to finance wastewater utility infrastructure within the city and borough, and submitting a proposition to the voters at the election to be held therein on October 1st, 2024, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, that motion passes. And Mr. Brooks, you could probably hit staff up during the break. All right, item number 6. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2023-14, version B, large letters AK. An ordinance appropriating $1,446,827 to the manager for the power upgrades for electric buses capital improvement project. Grant funding provided by the Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
This ordinance would appropriate $1.4 million to the power upgrades for electrical buses capital improvement project CIP. The funds would be used to purchase and install 2 pantographic chargers and supporting infrastructure at the Valley Transit Center. These chargers would provide backup charging for the bus barn and enable mid-route bus charging capabilities, promoting EV bus route expansion while upholding schedule availability. Grant funding is comprised of Federal Transit Administration funds passed through Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities. The local match requirement of $160,000 is being met by previously appropriated funds in the power upgrades for electric buses CIP. Public Works and Facilities reviewed this at its June 3rd, 2024 meeting. The Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed this ordinance at its June 18th, 2024 meeting. I recommend the Assembly take public testimony and adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Is there any public that wishes to testify to this ordinance? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the Assembly. Walgadot.
Yes, I move ordinance 2023-14 BAK and ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, that motion passes. Item 7, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2023-14, version B, large letters AL. An ordinance transferring $400,000 from CIP H51-113 Waterfront Seawalk to CIP P41-104 Homestead Park.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
This ordinance would transfer $400,000 from the Waterfront Seawalk CIP to the Homestead Park CIP. Homestead Park is a prime location for cruise ship passengers to view and photograph their cruise ship with Mount Juneau, Gastineau Channel, and downtown as the backdrop. The Homestead Park project is reconstructing failing and outdated infrastructure at the park, constructing larger viewing areas, and improving ADA accessibility. This transfer would provide funding for the unanticipated cost increases resulting from the most recent project estimate. Sufficient funds will remain in the Waterfront Seawalk CIP for anticipated work in the current and next phase of the project. The Homestead Park CIP is an eligible use of marine passenger fees. The Public Works and Facilities Committee reviewed this at its June 3rd, 2024 meeting. The Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed this ordinance at its June 18th, 2024 meeting. I recommend the Assembly take public testimony and adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to this ordinance? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the Assembly. Ms. Adkisson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move ordinance 2023-14, version B, large letter AL, and ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, that motion passes. Item 8, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2023-14, version B, large letters AM. An ordinance appropriating $36,712 to the manager for the construction phase of the Float Pond Improvements Capital Improvement Project. Funding provided by the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, Airport Improvement Program, AIP grant.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
The airport has been awarded an additional $36,000 in grant funding from the Federal Aviation Administration for the Float Pond Improvements CIP. This award will increase the previously awarded $2.2 million under Ordinance 2022-06 to a total award amount of just shy of $2.3 million. This funding would contribute toward the construction of raising the existing roadbed, introducing a drainage ditch, armoring the pond bank with rock, and reconstructing 14 float plane dock head walls. The local match requirement will be provided by previously appropriated funds in the Float Pond Improvement CIP. The Airport Board reviewed this request at its June 13, 2024 meeting. The Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed this ordinance at its June 18, 2024 meeting. I recommend the Assembly take public testimony and adopt this ordinance.
I think you're going faster as the night goes on, Madam Manager. Any member of the public wish to speak to this ordinance? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the Assembly. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move ordinance 2023-14, version B, capital letters AM, and ask for unanimous consent.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. And we do have the airport manager, Ms. Watto, here, if anybody has any questions. Any objections? Seeing none, that motion passes. Item 9, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2023-14, version B, large letters AN, an ordinance appropriating $170,660 to the manager for the airport snow removal equipment building capital improvement project. Funding provided by passenger facility charge fees.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
This ordinance would appropriate $170,000 of airport passenger facility charge fees to the airport snow removal equipment building CIP. The SREB CIP constructed a large open design garage to provide heated indoor storage space for the airport's snow removal fleet. These PFC funds will reimburse amounts that were forward funded from other sources, which is typical for passenger facility charge collections that are appropriated upon receipt. The Airport Board reviewed this request at its June 13, 2024 meeting. The Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed this ordinance at its June 18, 2024 meeting. I recommend the Assembly take public testimony and adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to this ordinance? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the Assembly. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move ordinance 2023-14BAN and ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, that motion passes. Item number 10, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2023-14, version B, large letters AO. An ordinance appropriating $222,066 to the manager for the ramp improvement, capital improvement project, funding provided by airport funds.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
This ordinance would appropriate $220,000 to the ramp improvement CIP. This project is constructing a new remaining overnight large aircraft parking ramp, rehabilitating deteriorating pavement for large and commercial aircraft parking ramps, repairing failing ramp drainage and catch basins, and upgrading ramp lighting. This appropriation will allocate local match funds for FAA grant funding. The Airport Board reviewed this request at its June 13, 2024 meeting. The Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed this ordinance at its June 18, 2024 meeting. I recommend the Assembly take public testimony and adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak to this ordinance? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the Assembly. Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the Assembly adopt ordinance 2023-14B, uppercase AO, and ask for unanimous consent.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. Any objection? I'm going to object for purposes of a question because I want Ms. Watto to be up here since she has to sit through this whole meeting. There's a couple rumors floating out there, Ms. Watto, and I just wanted you to clarify them. Is this the project currently going on, and are we going to get a new jetway because of it? That's my question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, it is the project that's currently going on. The new jet bridge, though, is a different project, but we are getting new jet bridges. As a matter of fact, they're going in right now.
Okay, I just landed the other night and someone asked me that question. I know the answer, so it's your turn. Anyway, thank you for that. I'll remove my objection. So that motion passes. Item 11, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2023-14, version B, large letters A, P. An ordinance appropriating $34,367 to the manager for the Airport Master Plan Capital Improvement Project. Funding provided by sales tax funds.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
This ordinance would appropriate $34,000 of 1% sales tax funds to the Airport Master Plan CIP. This funding will contribute towards the preparation of an updated airport master plan, which will include updates for air traffic, cargo, and passenger data and forecasts, changes to proposed aircraft servicing the airport, and layout plans for the future expansion of the runway, taxiway, and approach corridors. The 1% sales tax funds appropriated in this ordinance were allocated to the airport in fiscal year 18, but weren't appropriated until federal grant match was needed. This ordinance appropriates the remaining amount from the airport's FY18 1% sales tax allocation. This appropriation is consistent with the intent of the 2017 1% sales tax initiative approved by the voters in the October 3rd, 2017 municipal election. The Airport Board reviewed this request at its June 13, 2024 meeting. The Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed this ordinance at its June 18, 2024 meeting. I recommend the Assembly take public testimony and adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Any member of the public wish to speak to this ordinance? Seeing none, we will move it to the Assembly. Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the Assembly approve ordinance 2023-14 BAP, an ordinance appropriating $34,367 to the manager for the Airport Master Plan Capital Improvement Project, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, that motion passes. So before we go to staff reports, let's take about a 7-minute break. We'll come back on that clock at 11:45. Assembly back to order. And we are at our change of agenda. So, Madam Manager, I'll just go to you.
Thank you. The first item added in your agenda is just a notice of certification of the Ship-Free Saturday petition. The city clerk is required to submit this notice, and that starts the clock ticking on 45 days for the assembly to take any action, taking action substantially similar, enacting substantially similar legislation. So with that, this first item is really just an informational item, but I will pause before I launch onto the next topic to create adequate distance between the two.
Any questions for the city manager on this topic? Seeing none, go ahead.
Thank you. The second item in your red folder item is just a very brief memo explaining what staff proposes for kind of public information on Ship-Free Saturday. We kind of figured that the questions would be coming in. What are you going to do? What questions are you going to answer? And so we put together proposed frequently asked questions that we will work through and get posted hopefully by the end of the week. And those will be posted on the website. This is similar public information that we did for the repeal of mandatory real estate. You recall that was a citizens initiative that was brought forward. We had an FAQ on the website, and the same information was published in the voter information pamphlet. So that is kind of the extent of the information that staff intends to provide on the topic, and just wanted to give you that. So when you got questions from your constituents, you knew what we would be posting online.
Any questions on that? Ms. Wall?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for providing this to us. Looking through these questions, I definitely think, some of them we can be objective on, and then there are a few in here that I think would be hard to answer objectively. Even if you try your hardest, people are going to take, issue with how you would characterize these. I know this is just information only at this point, but is it okay if I take some of my comments offline on these questions, or are these pretty much ready to go?
Yes, and please bring your friend with you, and you can get together.
Absolutely.
Because the point is to make these questions objective, so. But at the same time, get information out there. Any other, unless you don't have any friends. I was looking at Wahaga when I said take your friend with you, so. Anyway, with that, any more questions? Seeing none, we will move on to the next item, correct? Or are you still on that topic? Okay, item 12. Who gets that beside Mr. Schaaf?
I will punt that one to Dr. Schaaf. He has a brief presentation for you.
Brief.
Emphasis on brief. That's how I know too much about this subject. Mr. Barr asked me to be brief tonight when he saw the slideshow. So I'm George Schaaf. I'm your Parks and Recreation Director. We're very proud to manage the Downtown Parking Management Program. The Parking Management Program has several goals that are set forth in ordinance, and I won't bore you with those tonight. But essentially, they are intended to make sure that we make the best use of the parking facilities we have and make sure that there's adequate on-street parking for people coming downtown to conduct business. Previously, we had a very analog process. You're probably familiar with the hang tags, the metal boxes that accepted coin or bill payments only, the 5-page carbon forms that JPD used to issue citations along with other departments. And we have since transitioned to a more modern electronic system. We've installed 8 electronic pay stations at our off-street parking lots, and also at the parking lots managed by the Docks and Harbors Department at Statter Harbor and at the Taku lot. These accept cash, coins, credit cards, tap to pay, Apple Pay, Apple Watch, whatever you can think of. And it is all license plate based system, so there's no need to display a permit of any kind anymore. We've also implemented a pay by phone option. So we have an app that you can use to pay for parking at the off-street lots that accept hourly payments. And we have installed LPR license plate recognition cameras that are fixed at the 2 parking garages downtown. and also mounted on the 2 scooters that the Juneau Police Department has for the community services officers who manage and enforce on-street parking. And the purpose of these are twofold. One, they allow us to verify that vehicles parking in the garages are allowed to be there, either because they have a permit or because they paid for that hourly space, or they've been validated by the library in the case of the library parking at the downtown or the Marine Park Garage. And then for the JPD scooters, this allows them to enforce the 2-hour on-street zone parking rule that has been in place since 2010, but has not been very easily enforced. This is just a quick idea to give you an idea of what it looks like, what kind of images the cameras are capturing. Even if you think you can't really read the plate, the cameras are very good at capturing that license plate, both on the street and in the garages. And as I mentioned, this is going to allow JPD to enforce that 2-hour zone parking rule. So the 2 hours that you get of free parking downtown begins when you enter the downtown parking management zone. And it is not something that resets the clock by moving your car 5 feet or a block through an intersection. We want to make sure we're encouraging folks to park off-street if they're going to be downtown for a while, and make sure that on-street parking is available for people who have a very short amount of time to conduct business downtown. Other things we've done to try to make the customer experience easier is you can now buy and manage your parking permits online through a web portal using a credit card. While we're happy to still see you at the Parks and Recreation office, and we'll happily accept your cash or check there, you don't have to come and visit us in person. You can do all of that online. You can add up to 3 vehicles on a single parking permit. So only 1 vehicle can use that permit at a time, but it allows families that have multiple vehicles that flexibility. If you do have the misfortune to receive a citation from JPD, Docks and Harbors, or Parks and Recreation, you can appeal or pay that citation online as well, again, also using a credit card, which was not a very easy option previously. So all told, this project was funded with a CIP that has been on the books since about 2012. It has occasionally had additional funding added to it, but the intent of it was to improve parking management through technology, and that's essentially what we've done here. The total cost of the hardware, the engineering, and the installation for the entire project is a little over $300,000. And the ongoing annual operating costs are about $52,000, and about half of that are fees that are passed through to customers in the form of credit card fees, or if you receive a citation, those are built into the citation cost. Citations do cost us about $5 a piece to issue, but the time savings between the issuing officer, the finance department, and the downstream time savings are much more than $5, I can assure you. A few bits of data here just to let you know. One of the questions we always get is, how do I get on the wait list? When do I get my parking permit for the off-street facilities? We sell more permits for both garages than we have space for, because the assumption is not every space will be used, every permit will be used at one time. For the Marine Park Garage, we're still learning. It used to be a 20% oversell ratio. So we'd sell 20% more permits than we had spaces, but since the pandemic, and I think because our prices are so low, people are buying a lot of permits and not using them. So we're up to a 34% oversell ratio for that facility. The Downtown Transit Center, we oversell by about 11%. The reason for that is it's really hard for us to sell an annual permit because we have to use a third of the capacity of the garage for the legislative session in the fall. So that creates a real pinch in the wintertime for us. The efficiencies of the new system are pretty dramatic. We really went live with it about May 20th, but a few departments were using it as early as May 1st. In that time, since through June 30th through Friday, we issued 622 warnings. So JPD, Docks and Harbors, and Parks and Rec were aggressive in issuing warnings, and we still are for things that are changing a little bit. But in that time, we also issued over 800 citations. And to give you a little bit of comparison, we issued about 900 citations in all of FY23 using the contractor that we had. So that has been a pretty remarkable increase. We're also seeing that it's not having a lot of deterrence. It's not getting a lot of compliance from the public. The fine of $25 has been on the books since about 2013. If we had adjusted that for inflation, it'd be $34 today. 20% of our citations are being issued to people who have already received a citation. We've got a lot of vehicles that have received multiple citations. We had one rental car company that was using the downtown garages to deliver vehicles to customers. They got 54 citations in 3 weeks. They happily paid it because it was cheaper than buying a parking permit for 18 vehicles. What we're proposing is an escalated fine structure so that we still understand people make mistakes, we still issue warnings, but after 2 or 3 offenses, people should understand what's going on, and we would like to try to get those folks to follow the rules by getting parking permits and moving their vehicle on street. So the proposal is to escalate the fines, increase the first offense from $25 to $35, up to $50 for the second offense, $100 for the third, $200 for the fourth, and $300 for each subsequent offense within the year. And that is very similar to what Sitka does in their harbors for their harbor offenses. Finally, just a couple of things. We are responding to concerns that we've heard from the community in the last year or two. We've installed 24 new security cameras in both of the parking garages. We have hired a full-time parking ranger to help with the enforcement in the garages and also to provide customer service and kind of troubleshoot some of the equipment in the field. We've just effective today issued new contracts for custodial services that have a higher standard of service. And the Parks and Recreation Department is now empowered to impound vehicles in place. And our park rangers are doing that not only in the parks, but also in our off-street facilities. We do know that there's still some things to be resolved. The signage in both garages needs a lot of help, so we are planning, we have a design process going on right now, and we'll be installing new signage soon. We're looking at doing a new product for the Downtown Transit Center of a monthly permit that could address some of the summer capacity concerns that we're having. We're going to release new permits to waitlisted customers soon. We're also going to be using citations by mail. We'll be invoicing for citations by mail at the garages, probably beginning in August. And then last, Docks and Harbors is working out some final bugs with our contractor on being able to buy and extend those multi-day permits at the harbor parking lots. And last, we're excited to be installing 2 new signs at Savico Park, reinstalling signs that previously were there for the Jimmy Manning ball fields. Apologies for the maybe dissonance with that, but it's something that we wanted to include for you. Those will be ready to go on by the 4th of July.
Any questions for Mr. Shaw? Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Schaaf, the pricing structure for the tickets is, going up significantly for the multiple offenders. Do you happen to know how many people or how many vehicles have received like 4+ citation? I mean, does it drop off rapidly after 3 or anyway? Just
through the mayor, I could tell you that. I can run lots of different reports. I can tell you that it's probably about 20 that have more than 4, and then you get into the single digits of people have more than 10.
Okay, thanks.
And that's in 2 months.
Any further questions? Mr. Kelly? Okay, so this is going to be introduced. Let's see, how is it? Introduce this ordinance and set it for the public hearing at the next regular assembly meeting. So the question to the body is whether this needs to hit a committee before it comes back to the assembly. People are saying no. Okay.
I actually have a question about the ordinance itself. I thought we were just on the presentation thing.
Oh, okay. Sorry for my not being clear. Nope. Well, I'm going to Mr. Kelly because you already talked. Mr. Kelly, do you have a question on the ordinance itself?
Thank you. Yes, I did. So I had maybe a few questions, but I'll wait my turn with most of them. So.
Yes, you will.
When it comes to measuring, incrementing the offense, is that going to be tied to? You said like one of the regular offenders is a rental car company that finds it cheaper to not buy the permit and just pay the fines. But of course, those are going to be different drivers driving those vehicles each time. So is this ordinance set up to increment the offenses based off of the driver, the vehicle owner? How is that going to be set up?
You get that, Mr. Shaw?
Thank you for the question. I'll take a stab at it. So under city code, the registered owner of the vehicle is responsible ultimately for the payment of parking citations that the vehicle receives. Certainly, people can appeal the citation and say that they are renting the vehicle and it's the first time they've received a citation. And we have a hearing officer process that can navigate that. That said, just for clarification, when I mentioned the rental car company, that was not, those citations weren't necessarily received by customers, that was received by employees. They were a result of the employees of the company parking vehicles in the garage to deliver them to the customers.
Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just had a question on the deletion of that the traffic citation may be placed on the vehicle. And I guess the only things that kind of just came to mind were like, if it's not placed on the vehicle, do we lose, is there any like loss of deterrent? I understand why maybe to do it, but like, is there like a photo on the citation? So they're like, that's right, I parked in front of that place for too long, as opposed to being like, where was I on June 11th at, 4:48? I guess, is there something that can help identify it? And then I'm also just wondering about, is there something so that if they feel like they can, but maybe it's hard to contest the ticket now with whatever's provided as like evidence for.
You're squeezing more than one question in there.
I guess my question is talking about the deterrence effect and people's ability to kind of contest a charge.
Mr. Shaw?
Yeah.
Thank you for the question. So yes, one of the great things about the new system is it does allow us to take a photo or multiple photos of the vehicle that is receiving the violation. We've never been able to do that before. And that has really, I think, reduced the number of appeals that we've been getting. And those photos are visible to the person who receives the citation. If there's a QR code on the citation, also a website address. If they go there, enter the citation number, it will show them exactly where they received it, when they received it, the violation, the fine, and all the photos that were taken as well. And those, that is increasingly being the more common way that parking citations are being issued, as well as tolls on highways, red light cameras, and things like that. So, the company, we would review the violations received by the system every day, make sure that the plate reads are correct, and make sure that that plate does not have a permit or is otherwise authorized to be there. But they would receive the citation promptly, and they would still have an opportunity to appeal it. The multiple citations we've been seeing have been over the course of weeks, and I think by then they would start to get the message. So our ultimate goal is not to issue any citations. It would be great if folks just follow the rules.
Thanks.
Mr. Bryson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When Madam Manager mentioned that she was putting separation, I just now clicked with me why you're separating these two. We actually talked about the parking system at Public Works and Facilities, and the one note that I took from that is that this is going to provide far more accurate, like parking metering compared to what the old style used to be, and so having a more accurate parking readings, that act itself is what's going to help reduce parking violations.
Is there a question in there, Mr. Bryson?
I was trying to figure one out. No, Madam Mayor, thank you.
Okay, I could ask a question, then we'll go back to Mr. Kelly. Are people still able to use dollar bills if they don't have the app on their phone?
Thank you for that question. So for downtown, for meters, pay stations operated by Parks and Recreation, no, they take coin only. For the ones operated by Docks and Harbors, they do take bills. And the reason we did that is that Docks and Harbors has higher rates, and so it's more likely that people need to pay with bills or want to pay with bills. And for our purposes, most of the revenue we were getting were coins. The bill acceptors have a higher failure rate, so it was more of a maintenance issue we didn't want to deal with. I can tell you about 4% of our transactions are cash. 96% have been credit card of either pay by app or pay by meter.
Okay, I didn't totally understand your answer, though. You can still use cash of some sort.
Correct. You can use coins for our meters and coins or bills for Docks and Harbors.
All right. Mr. Kelly?
Thank you. So as somebody who used to live downtown, I'm pretty familiar with the downtown parking zone, but I'm at this point thinking of people who might not visit downtown frequently or who might be new to town. Maybe they park, they're in a hurry, they might not see the signs. Recognizing that there were 600 and some odd warnings, if I remember that number correctly. After our trial period of sorts, what's the policy going forward going to be with warnings?
Mr. Shaw.
Thank you. So just for clarification, are you referring to on-street parking mainly?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So the police department is managing the warning period and how they're approaching that. I could phone a friend with Mr. Barr if you wanted to elaborate a little bit, but I know that they are having a long warning period.
Mr. Barr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I understand the question correctly, I think the question is, what's the warning system look like after the trial period is over? Is that right? The community service officers strive to follow the code. So with this system, they'll be able to, as Mr. Schaaf said, much more simply understand when a vehicle has been in the on-street downtown parking management zone for longer than 2 hours and issue a citation. After that period of time, after we're confident that people have adapted to the new system, which will gain that confidence as the number of warnings decreases and the number of appeals goes down, and they're already pretty low. The CSOs will stop issuing warnings, will transition to citations, and individuals who receive citations will have the appeal process to satisfy them at that point.
Thank you, Mr. Barr. Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Personally, say this is awesome. I'm so excited. And I'm afraid to ask the next question. We also just did a new airport parking system. Are they different apps and systems? Yes, okay, thank you.
Of course they are. Okay, I'll see the will of the body on this one, because I would propose a change. And my change is, I'm sure everybody else is very well organized and leaves lots of room between their times that they have to get there, but sometimes my life doesn't allow that, and so I may hit a little bit of a yellow line every once in a while, so my proposed change would be the first offense is 35, the second offense is 35, and then it increases further on after that. If we could live with that, that would be my change. Yes, Ms. Clerk, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If you guys are actually going to be discussing the merits of this ordinance, it has not yet been properly, we haven't read it into the record, and it has not been introduced, and
Okay, well,
there's some process.
Be prepared for that amendment when we introduce it properly. Thank you, Madam Clerk, for keeping us on track. Or Madam Attorney, whoever called that one. We'll deal with that later, so, but the body did not want to send this to a committee, correct? Okay. Mr. Kelly, do you have another question?
Just a procedural question. So at this point, do we, since it wasn't in the consent agenda, do we need a motion to introduce this and then move it on? And I guess a follow-up question, if I may. At that time, would it be appropriate for the mayor to introduce an amendment?
Yes, after introduction, after a motion has been made, yeah.
Okay, Mr. Bryson,
Thank you, Madam
I
Mayor.
asked you to do that earlier. But I got out of sequence, I apologize. I was so excited.
I move that the Assembly introduce ordinance 2024-09, an ordinance amending parking notice requirements, and ask for unanimous consent. And ask for it to be set for public hearing at the next regular Assembly meeting, and ask for unanimous consent for that.
Any objection? Seeing none, that motion passes. I'm passing my baton to Mr. Smith to make my motion. You're in charge for 30 seconds.
Madam Mayor,
So my motion would be to change the fee schedule to allow the first and second offense to remain the same at 35, and then increase after that for both those two items that we're referring to. And I ask for unanimous consent.
I have a question for you. Did, oh, very good. Objection.
Objection for purposes of a question. Are you proposing then that we have a 6th and subsequent that goes to 300, or do we just stop at 200?
I'm proposing, thank you for that, Wahagadok. I'm proposing a 6th and subsequent at 300.
Okay, I remove my objection.
Further objection? Seeing none, that motion is adopted.
Was that hard Human Resources Committee meeting beforehand? All right, thank you for that. Like I said, I'm sure everybody else is very well organized and never encounters a parking ticket in their life, but I admit I do occasionally. With that, any other questions? Mr. Kelly, you have any questions on this one? Further questions? Any further comment on this one? It's going to be at our next assembly meeting for public hearing. And any staff want to add to any of this? Okay, moving on then to assembly reports. Mayor's report, I'll be quick. Very excited to see the Jimmy Manning ball fields, renaming them. They were, somehow that was lost in transition. He was a Tlingit athlete, and we're pretty excited to have the fields renamed after him. So we're excited about that. Happy 4th of July to everybody, and remember what we're celebrating. And I ask everybody just to please be courteous with their fireworks. I saw a sign that said fireworks for sale, so we know they're being sold, so just please be courteous with their fireworks and be nice to your neighbors. With that, we'll go down the list. Mr. Bryson, oh, excuse me. Apologize, I'm gay. You're rubbing off on me, Mr. Smith. Committee reports. We don't have Madam Hale, Mrs. Hale, Ms. Wall. It's been a long night already.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Finance Committee met and we talked about how the budget process went, provide some feedback to staff, and we also heard about our audit. And our next Finance Committee meeting, which would regularly be next week, has been canceled.
All right, Mr. Bryson, Public Works.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Public Works and Facilities did not have we had one meeting canceled. Right now, the Public Works and Facility members have the Floyd Dryden and Marie Drake surveys that we're supposed to turn in today to Director Koch. And there is a water line survey that has been mailed out to every individual at home, where they're supposed to check where the water line comes into their house to determine if you have a copper line, a steel pipe, or a lead. It's a lead survey that you will find a flyer in your mailbox, and it's really easy to fill out, and it'll take you about 30 seconds. And then you'll know if you have lead in your water lines in your home. That's it for Public Works and Facilities. We meet again on this coming 15th.
And if people didn't get that report in their mailboxes or somewhere online, they could do it, Madam Manager?
Absolutely. In fact, the report will direct you to the website. So if you look at the Engineering and Public Works website, you can just as easily fill out an online survey.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bryson. We don't have Ms. Hughes Candies here, so Human Resources.
Madam Mayor, the full assembly, or everyone who is here tonight, met as the Human Resources Committee to interview applicants for the Docks and Harbors Board. We are meeting and interviewing applicants for the Eagle Crest and Airport Board tomorrow, and then afterwards we'll have a special assembly meeting where we'll make appointments and then let all the candidates know how things went. But that's what I have for HRC.
Thank you, and the meeting tomorrow is at
5:30.
5:30? Perfect.
It's all Zoom, yes.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Smith. With that, committee and liaison reports, Mr. Bryson.
Arctic Energy office was here. I attended the service for Fred Paraday, and I learned that he had had a great impact on not only Juneau, but the state of Alaska. And Officer Steve Scheer, I attended his retirement at JPD. He served JPD for 12 years and the Petersburg Police Department for 12 years previous to that. So we want to thank Officer Scheer for 24 years of Southeast Police Service. And that is my report, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. Ms. Wall, can you match that report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I missed the chamber meeting because I was out of service, but I know they have board elections coming up. So board applications for the chamber are due August 11th. And then they are also taking applications for Citizen of the Year, Business of the Year, and Lifetime Achievement Awards. Those are due August 18th. My other board is Eagle Crest. They met about 3 weeks ago now, 3 or 4 weeks ago now. As many of you know, the board asked for the resignation of the general manager prior to that meeting, and so there were many members of the public there to testify about that. The board is, I know, focused on recruiting for their next general manager. And they meet again next week, so I'll see if I can get an update on how that's going from them.
Is there anything you share publicly with the city attorney search committee?
Not at this time. We will be meeting in executive session following this meeting, so I can update the board on where the committee is, and I expect we'll figure out as a body when we are going to let the public know what the next steps in the process are.
Thank you for that. Ms. Wall?
Yes, all the airport board stuff, we all talked about it here, so you know what happened there. Didn't get a chance to attend the Juneau Commission on Aging, next 2 meetings, July 11th for the airport and July 16th for the Juneau Commission on Aging. Our local NYO team is over in Canada at Summer Games, competing in Whitehorse, so wish them the best of luck. And then the Alaska Federation of Natives announced their new president, and if you missed it, it is our very own Ben Malott, whose father was a previous mayor of this town, so congratulations to Ben.
Thank you, Walgadog. Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The JEDC met on June 21st. They talked about ARPA being over and some COVID loan program details. They also talked a bit conceptually about potentially acquiring the Triangle building with UAS to do some, entrepreneurship like grants and space for new businesses, that sort of thing. They also hired a new financial staff person, Sam Muse, which resolved their only audit comment this year. So that's good news. And then Ducks and Harbors met on June 27th. They mainly talked about the new board member applications and things they were hoping to see in new board members. And also we went over some concerns they had with the Title 85 changes, mainly with giving the assembly powers to change the rates for the docks. And that is all I have to report on those 2 committees.
Thank you, Ms. Atkinson. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. As liaison to the Planning Commission, I attended their meeting on June 25th. At that meeting, they voted to forward a recommendation to us to upzone a residential property that's out near Auk Bay that has water access but no sewage access. At that same meeting, they allowed the Ridgeview condos to adjust their plans slightly in response to soil conditions, and will be moving the buildings east to allow for underground parking lot. The School Board Finance Committee met on June 27th. They decided at that meeting to set a regular schedule. So they will, beginning in August, there'll actually be no school district meetings in July, but beginning in August, They will be meeting every fourth Thursday at noon over Zoom. At that meeting, they reviewed special education, revenue and expenses, and they discussed a memo they received from DEED about the potential changes to outside the cap funding. The Emergency Planning Committee has not met since our last meeting. Over the last couple weeks, I attended the Community Pride Picnic on the 23rd. I attended the Maesters Fair this Saturday and Pride Outside yesterday. And a comment I forgot to make at our last meeting, I just wanted to recognize how hard our clerks have been working with all of the recall petitions, referendums, petitions. I came in Saturday morning a couple weeks ago. Just to grab my packet. I did not expect to see anybody there, but Madam Clerk was hard at work, and she told me that in a couple hours somebody else was going to be coming to relieve her. So I just wanted to give special recognition to our hardworking clerks.
Thank you for doing that, Mr. Kelly. Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Kelly gave a little update on school board as they were looking at how to expend the approved funding from the state of Alaska, a little over $5 million to hopefully restore programs and reduce that pupil-teacher ratio. It is somewhat, I mean, it's great that they receive the funds, challenging because it is one-time funding, so no certainty for next year. But they were looking at how to restore some of those essential programs. The Downtown Business Association did not meet. I also went to the Pride Picnic, went to the Fred Parody Service, meant to wish everyone I don't know if it's a happy Juneteenth or what the word in front of Juneteenth should be, but to celebrate Juneteenth and recognize its significance. That was a couple weeks ago, but happy 4th for everyone. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Who gets the presiding officer report? Is that you, Ms. Wright?
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'll just note, I'm not going to be able to answer any questions. I am conflicted on this because I initially was serving on one portion, so I'll just let you know. Mr. Palmer will be back on the 22nd. The hearing officer did issue a new ruling. I believe you all received a copy. It was also in the packet, and the plan is to discuss that on the 22nd.
All right, thank you. So we can't ask any questions at this time, but just be aware of that. All right, any further comments or questions from the assembly? Seeing none, we'll go to continuation of public participation on non-agenda items. Is there anybody signed up in the back? I don't think so. So we will go to Mr. Bryson. You want to move us into executive session?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I propose that we move into executive session to discuss matters that the immediate knowledge of which would defame or prejudice the character or reputation of any person and discuss recruitment examination materials that are confidential, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Is there any member of the public that chooses to object? Seeing none, we will meet you all upstairs in 5 minutes.
Madam Mayor, I just want to let everyone from the public know that this is going to end the public portion of tonight's assembly meeting. They will recess upstairs in the mayor's office in executive session. And those in the public that are currently in the chambers, you can gradually make your way out of the chambers. You don't have to rush out of the room. Thank you. And we will be ending the Zoom session at this time.